All right, hello everybody. Hopefully you didn't have too much trouble finding the meeting. Had to restart because there was like a little glitch with getting the other one going live, but I'm sure you'll find your way here. Thanks everyone for your time and your attendance today. We got about 5 minutes until class time, so just get comfortable for now and feel free to say hello in the chat. I'll be right with you guys in just a couple minutes. Hello, hi guys. Rose, L, everybody else here. Good to see you folks. Hi, Fernanda. Oh, yeah, thanks. This is the apricot flavor. I don't know if I really have tried it before, but it's pretty good. Okay. About 3 minutes to go, 2.5 minutes to go. Hello, Nate. Yeah, well, I always have it in my fridge. I mean, I'm at home. The fridge is 4 feet away from me right now. So, gotta stay hydrated with the beverages. Hello, everybody. Sarah, Tyler, Megan, all the rest of you guys. Appreciate you for being here. Hey, Justin, Kiva, everybody there. Nice. Heat or Celtics? That's a tough one. Probably the Heat. Jimmy Butler, you know, he's balling. I mean, the Celtics have a good team thing going on, but I don't feel like they have the star power. Maybe in this stage of the playoffs, you need a little bit more firepower to get over the hump. But it's going to be Lakers, I'm pretty sure. At this point, they're major favorites. So I think LeBron's going to get another one and bring it home to LA, which is kind of cool. That's a bright spot. Hi, Adriana. Good to see you there. Okay, just another few seconds, and then I'll let us get started. Hi, Betsy, and all you guys. I'm doing well, you know. you guys, maybe I mentioned that I'm a big runner. So one thing I'm a little sad about is that now with the air quality, I haven't been able to really get out there since like Friday or Saturday for my usual daily run. Not so nice, right? Like now we have a pandemic, so can't do a lot of stuff. But one thing that you could have still done was run. Now I can't do that. So anyway, I'm just getting by with my video games, hanging out, teaching. Yeah, no, that's cool that you did cross country. My brother Danny, he's cross country and try to dig into that, try to stay fit. But hopefully the air quality gets back below 100 AQI, in the near future. But yeah, guys, welcome back. So, okay, thank you for being here as usual. As you guys know, today is the due date of that first homework. So most of you, I'm sure, have already sent it to me. If you haven't done it, make sure that you do it right away so that you don't get any late deductions or anything. For each submission that I'm receiving, I'm giving a confirmation email to the student. So, you may have to wait a few hours or something as I'm doing tasks throughout the day, but I'm going to go through everything I've gotten today before I go to bed tonight. And so if you've turned in something to me already, you're going to get a confirmation. If you have not already gotten it, you'll get it by the end of the night. Anyways, then the next meeting Thursday coming up, I'll talk to you guys about the answers, and I'll provide the answer key, and anybody can check for their score by just sending me a message at any time throughout the whole weekend and stuff. Then, as we return next Tuesday, is the first quiz. The first quiz is on Chapter 8 and 1. Betsy, you meant to put critical thinking. I don't know what you're referring to, though. You meant to put it in reference to what? But you'll let me know. Anyway, my bad. Yeah, so that's just a little update on our schedule. It's all going according to schedule, but today is the due date of Homework 1. That's page 252, exercise 8.3, part 1, letters A through J. Oh, I see. Yeah, no, not to worry. Betsy, are you talking about the title of a message that you delivered your homework in? Did I make a note to you? Well, the thing that I said was that if you wrote the word philanthropy, and I believe, yeah, different word, philanthropy, philanthropic contributions, giving to the poor, giving to the needy, giving to those less fortunate, philosophy, love of wisdom. So it's just a joke. But anyway, thank you. You caught it. All right. So guys, welcome back. What we're going to do today is finish up chapter 1, right? So the test, the quiz that we do have next Tuesday is on those two chapters, chapter 8 and 1. So the goal today is to get all the notes finished up on chapter 1, and then you'll be set to go for the quiz that follows next week. And I'll be in touch with you guys about the details of how to submit your quiz next week. But first things first, let's finish up all our notes on chapter 1 today, and then we'll be able to review a little bit for the quiz on Thursday, and maybe I will postpone the discussion of chapter 3 till after the quiz so that we don't have too much new information clouding your mind before you take your quiz. We'll just see how the schedule plays out Thursday, but I want to do some review for your quiz and go over the homework problems, so we'll take significant time on our next meeting doing those two things. Okay, and Miguel, yes, you could turn it in as a Google Doc. I'll accept all formats as long as it does deliver through to me. So Google Doc, PDF, doc files. Yeah, the quiz will be through the delivery system for our school, so I'll send it to you. You'll get it as a class announcement, but you can just send it back to me either as an email attachment or as the case may be through the delivery system itself. Yeah. Jasmine, you say we were supposed to get a comment back so we know that you got it? Yeah, you'll turn it in to me through email. You know my email address, which is listed in the syllabus, so you'll simply provide the document, which is the filled-in test form, as an email attachment, and I'll send it to you as a class announcement earlier in the day, just around this time of 4 p.m. You'll turn it in through email. Jasmine, your question, comment back so we know you got it. Yes, I have been sending those comments back, but if you just send it to me today, like in the past couple of hours or so, like I was trying to say at the beginning of the meeting, I've been busy doing tasks, so you have to provide me a little window to give you your email response, but it's going to come back to you no later than tonight. When did you turn it in, Jasmine? When did you turn in your homework? That's my question to you. Jasmine, you there? Oh yeah, a few days ago? Okay, I'll go back and double check. it should have been already confirmed. But let's be in touch. I'll check for your message right after class and send you that confirmation. Okay, not to worry. So I'm going to finish our meeting today at 5:15, and I'll go back and look. Can you provide your full name here, just so that I know exactly which message that I'm looking for in my inbox? Jasmine DeGray. Okay, I'll check it for you. I'm going to write it down. Okay. I'll take down your email too. And in case I didn't find it, I'll send you a message and I'll request it from you by the message. But I think it should be there. So we'll just double check. Sometimes when you don't use your school email and use your Gmail account, sometimes that causes the spam blocker to intercept it and not deliver it through. I've noticed that happen at least once in the past. So that could be the source of the issue, but we'll just double check. It'll be all settled, so don't worry. Okay, yeah, how long will the quiz take, L? It's not intended to take longer than the class period, so 1 hour and 15 minutes, basically. It's just a short quiz. It's gonna have like 15 questions. When I've ever handed these in class face-to-face format that we used to have, it was always given, and most students will complete it before even half of the class period is over. So for 75 minutes or so of class, people usually finish it within a half hour. So you've got plenty of time, you'll be well prepared, and you have all your notes, okay? So you'll be able to do well as long as you've been focused on the class a little bit. Okay, so thank you guys for your questions. It's awesome. Yeah, Christina, is there any way I can turn in my homework after work or on your lunch break? Yeah, you could go ahead and do that. Zoom? No, Sebastian, we're not gonna do Zoom, no. The answer is no. You're just going to be taking this quiz by yourself. But anyways, thank you. Okay. All right, guys. So let's continue through these notes. As we were here last time, let me ask you, can we remember, didn't I get as far as to talk to you about the benefits that come from being a good critical thinker? So we talked about like that it helps you with personal confidence and your self-esteem, that it helps you to make a rational plan in life, and that it also makes you a better citizen in a democracy, yeah? Okay. No problem. So then after that, the next little section of chapter 1 goes over what are considered, I guess, we call these barriers to critical thinking. In other words, obstacles that prevent us from being better critical thinkers or that get in the way of us doing it well. So, like so far in the class, I've tried to give you guys a sense that it's very important to be a good critical thinker, that it's an intellectual skill that equips you for all sorts of things in life, that makes you more competitive in the marketplace, makes you a more well-rounded human being, a better consumer of information, less likely to be fooled, manipulated, deceived, exploited, make better consumer choices. So it has all of these across-the-board benefits, makes you more confident, better self-esteem, you're a better participant in your democracy, you make better plans. Okay, so if it's all good and it makes all these benefits happen, then why don't people just want to do it all the time? Why isn't it just, the natural second nature habit that we already have? Well, the thing is, we've got a lot of us, all of us really, a set of habits that we build up over the course of our lives, intellectual habits, and sometimes they're not constructive, they're not helpful, and sometimes we have to know what those bad habits are so that we can work on them and try and do a little bit better. None of us like to be wrong. None of us like to reconsider ourselves or to be challenged in terms of what we believe. Sometimes we're a little intellectually lazy and we don't like to seek out all the evidence to support the views that we have. So only by knowing what the different barriers and obstacles to critical thinking are, only by knowing that can we pay attention to it and maybe try and make an intentional effort to better. So we're going to talk about the barriers to critical thinking. That's the main lesson. But just before that in the textbook, there's one little thing that I wanted to go over also, and that is the 3 stages of the critical thinking process. Okay, so okay, so the note I wrote on the board here just says 3 stages of the critical thinking process. In our chapter 1 of the textbook, they discuss this. So critical thinking is something that can be distinguished as playing out in various stages or levels. There are 3 of them, and the first one is just called the experience level, or the experience stage of critical thinking. Okay, so that's the first stage. After that, there is interpretation. And the third stage of the thinking process is commitment. No, not commitment, I'm sorry. Analysis. The reason that I almost wrote commitment accidentally is because we did talk about a 3-part process in another part of chapter 1. If you guys remember, that was the 3 stages of cognitive development, not to be confused with the 3 stages of a person's critical thinking process. So cognitive development was dualism, relativism, commitment. Here we have experience, interpretation, and analysis. So I'm going to define each one and give you guys some examples to think about here, okay? So the first one is the experience stage or level of critical thinking. At that stage, a person merely describes what their experience was without yet trying to understand or explain why or how it happened. Okay? Alec, you say the quality's not good. Cannot read the board. Well, sure, I'll put it in the chat. At the same time, though, everything that I write on the board is just derived from the textbook. And since you do have the video playback, you can always examine it again. It's not as if I'm not going to say the words that I'm going to write on the board. But, you know, whatever. Let's put it on there. No, that's fine. I don't mind putting the note here. So, experience. One describes what their experience was without yet trying to explain why or how it happened. All right. I'm still going to write it on the board, though. I have to write it on the board. That's just professor stuff that I like to do, okay? We have a little extra room here. What it says there is this. No worries, thank you. Yeah. One describes what their experience was without yet trying to explain why or how it happened. The other thing, too, is about the devices. I know some people have different size screens, right? So you might be looking on like a small little laptop or even phone, as the case could be. If that's the case, you're going to have a hard time reading anything. You know, I have one of the bigger MacBooks, the large size, so I can actually read a lot of this stuff. Even as I'm looking at it in the camera, because it's kind of reversed, I can still read it. But just for the sake of all of us, since I know we have different devices, I'll put any notes up there that you request. Sorry for the typo in my little written description. Word ought should be IT, the word it. Okay, so one described what their experience was without yet trying to explain why or how. Sorry, the word or how it happened. Now, you have to have an experience before there's anything to analyze or try and figure out. But at the experience level of the critical thinking stage, you're not yet trying to explain why it happened. You're just trying to say what happened. So for example, it could be like, I didn't do well on my quiz. That's just what happened. That's just the experience. But you might be curious to know, why didn't I do well on this quiz? What's the reason? At the experience stage, though, you don't go into that next step. You just note what happened. So it's more the what of the critical thinking process. Just what did occur. And that could be anything. I didn't get the job, or it could be I did get the job, or I got an A on the test. I got a traffic ticket. So whenever something happens, the first thing you do is you take note of it, just describing the experience itself. But after a while, if you're a real critical thinker, you don't want to just have stuff happen to you and then just have no interpretation or explanation of why. You want to know why the things happen, so that if it was a good thing that happened, you could try and make it happen again. Or that if it was a bad thing that happened, that you can know about why, so you can avoid it in the future. So that's where you go into the second stage. And the second stage is called the interpretation stage. So I'm going to write it on the board first, and then I'll put it in the chat. So at the interpretation stage, you go beyond just what the experience was, and now for the first time you try to explain, interpret, in other words, why or how it happened. Okay? Okay, good. Good, I'm glad to know that the screen looks better. If it has changed, then it had to have changed just due to the bandwidth or the the bit rate that was coming across. Sometimes Wi-Fi can slow down or whatever, so we're all doing the best we can in this new online environment. But I'm here to help you guys, so do let me know if there's anything I can make more visible or explain better. I want to do that. Okay, so interpretation. All right, so one tries to explain why or how the experience happened. So like, for example, you didn't do so well on your quiz. Maybe you have an interpretation or an explanation. When you think about it now, why didn't I do well? Sometimes your first explanation, your first interpretation of the facts could be a little self-serving and even biased. So like, probably your first instinct, or some people, I wouldn't say this about you, but some people's first instinct might be like, if I didn't do well in the quiz, it's the teacher. The teacher was a bad teacher. They couldn't convey the material to me. I couldn't make sense of any of their notes. So basically, it's the teacher's fault that I did poorly on the quiz. Or, you got a traffic ticket, maybe for speeding, and you're like, okay, that's what happened. That was the experience. Now I'm interpreting why. Maybe this cop needed to fill a quota. Maybe he just had a certain number of tickets that he had to give out, and so he pulled me over even though I was basically going close to the speed limit just to fill the quota. Maybe you have an interpretation like that. Sometimes the experiences that we interpret didn't necessarily happen to us directly. It could just be something that's out there in the world. So like Donald Trump won the presidency in 2016. That's just what happened. But if you want to try and explain why or how, if you want to try and come to some understanding of that, then you might interpret the reasons why. And there are many different possible interpretations. Someone could say there was economic anxiety. Someone could say that there was, fear of immigration. Somebody could say, it was because of dissatisfaction with the opponent, or poor campaigning by Hillary Clinton. So there's many different possible interpretations that a person could take to like anything, whether it's a personal event, like you got a ticket or you didn't do so well on a test, or something that happens in the world, in the news, or in current affairs. So yeah, you try and interpret the reasons to explain why or how those things happen. But in the critical thinking process, there's actually a third final step, okay? And that's what is called in the book analysis. So I'll put that here. Okay, so at the analysis stage, you actually now try to reconsider your previous interpretation to see, is it the best one, or is there a better possible interpretation? So one considers whether their previous interpretation was correct, or if there is a better alternative interpretation or explanation. Okay, so what it says there is analysis, third stage. That's when one considers whether their previous interpretation was correct, or, on the other hand, is there a better alternative interpretation of the given experience? So A critical thinker doesn't just want to sort of let it rest with their first stab at attempting to explain why something happened. The reason for that is because sometimes your initial judgment can be overturned by future judgment that's based on more evidence, or perhaps having gained distance from the events, less bias, or less emotional quiz or a test. Like I told you, that's just the experience. What happened was not doing so well. The interpretation initially could have been to cast blame elsewhere, like it's the professor's fault. But suppose that the student in our hypothetical case spoke with their classmates and found out that most other classmates actually did very well on the quiz. After having learned about that, they might not be able to really just say with the same confidence that it's simply because of the teacher's poor teaching methods. So they might have to then think about, well, maybe it's because I never bought the book, or maybe because I never read the book or studied at all, that I wasn't prepared, and that might be the better interpretation. So critical thinkers are open-minded to revision of their beliefs in the light of new information or just better judgment later on. That doesn't mean that your first interpretation is always wrong. Sometimes you have good instincts and you make the right call in your first explanation of why something happened. But you owe it to yourself as a good critical thinker to always subject your interpretations of things to future reconsideration. So that's what the analysis phase is all about. Like me, for example, just to let you guys know, I used to have a bike. It was a really nice bike. It's one of these old classic Schwinn bikes from like the 70s. It's the Schwinn Collegiate. If you look that up, it's a classic bike. Okay, so I bought it from an online ad that someone was just selling it privately. I had it for years. I had it from 2005 until 2019, last year, because when I moved to Long Beach, which is where I live now, I have a balcony. And it's not up that high. It's on the first floor of the building, but on this balcony, I put my bike. But I didn't lock the bike because I thought, who's going to come up here? Spider-Man? Like you're going to have to climb up a wall pretty much and then climb over my balcony's side to take the bike. So I just thought, I'll just leave the bike out on the balcony. I don't want to have it, in the apartment or have to lock it up somewhere. One day it was stolen, okay? So I came back from teaching at Orange Coast College, and when I got home, I pulled into the garage that's beneath the balcony. I would have seen the bike there, but I didn't see it. That was weird. So when I got up there, I look around like, man, the bike has been stolen. So anyway, what's the experience? The bike was stolen. That's just what happened. Before I ever tried to think why did that happen? That's just what happened. That was the event itself. Now, my first interpretation was pretty self-serving, right? Because I was mad that my bike got taken, and obviously, I'm a victim of theft. Even if I left the bike in the middle of, a busy square, it's nobody's right to take it if it's not theirs. But anyway, so my first thought was, it must be a lot of crime, just rampant petty theft. I'm living in a neighborhood with a lot of crime. But as I reconsidered it, I thought, I could have been in any neighborhood. And if you don't secure your bike with a lock, it's an attractive thing for anybody passing by to want to take. If it could have been a kid, it could have been anybody. So I put a little more of the blame on myself as I rethought about it. In everyday life, there's a lot of experiences that we have and that other people have. And as good critical thinkers, we don't want to just have stuff happen and not think twice about it and not figure out why. Now, because of that, if I have another bike, I'm going to secure it better. And I'm going to take the necessary precautions in order to prevent its theft. But that's only because I determined on my own, that I had something that I could have done better. So in life, we want to have good explanations for the things that we do. We want to be able to explain ourselves to other people. We also want to be able to explain the things that happen to ourselves so that we have a coherent understanding. And going through those steps in that little list is a pretty good way to achieve that goal. Let me read from the book on it, and that will just help kind of close that discussion. So it says, 3-tier model of critical thinking. First of all, first of all, experience. The first level includes firsthand experiences as well as information or facts that we receive from other sources. Experience is the foundation of critical thinking. It provides the material for interpretation and analysis. So like they give this example, I was turned down for the job that I interviewed for. Or just a fact, cloning is not legal in the United States. Or just a fact, African Americans represent only 13% of the US population, but make up 38% of the prison inmates. Okay, those are just either experiences or information that the person comes across. At the interpretation stage, the second level, one tries to make sense of the experience. So Our interpretations may be well-informed, others may be based merely on our opinions of personal feelings and prejudice. Some possible interpretations of the previous experiences could be, why didn't I get the job? Because I didn't have the right connections. Why is human cloning illegal in the United States? It must be immoral. And they offer this would be a racist and improper judgment, I believe, but it says, oh, black men make up such a large percentage of the prison population because they're more violent. But the analysis level, the third phase, requires that we raise our level of thinking, critically examine our own interpretation, and refuse to accept either narrow interpretations or interpretations that are too broad. So you have to then try and be willing to scrutinize your own previous judgment and to determine whether there are better judgments or better explanations that are available out there. So like in the case of the first one, didn't get the job, the analysis phase has it where the person asks this question: was it really my lack of connections, or was it just the poor interview skills and my lack of qualifications that caused me not to get the job? Why is human cloning illegal? Are there circumstances in which human cloning might be acceptable? Is there any evidence that black men are more violent, or possible that black men are simply discriminated against more than white men? Are there other factors at work that could account for their overrepresentation in the prison population? So by using the three-tiered model of critical thinking, we assure that when we have experiences or when we receive information from other sources, that we evaluate it, that we evaluate why or how that could be true, and that we don't allow ourselves to just rest at our first easy assumption or explanation, that we always reach for the best available explanation, and we leave that as an open-ended project for the future. Okay, so that's the three stages of the critical thinking process. That's the first part of our notes today. Just to kind of be consistent, I'll put that last note in the chat as well. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to erase this part, and now we will talk about those barriers to critical thinking that I mentioned at the top of the meeting today. Okay. All good, everybody? You guys doing well? Hopefully so. I see we got a nice full group, so that's always great. Okay, so now barriers to critical thinking. All right, so first of all, these are things that we shouldn't do, okay? So these barriers are in oftentimes cases of things that we have habits of doing. In many cases, we don't really have like conscious awareness of ourselves doing these things, but we want to try and catch ourselves and monitor ourselves a little bit, hold ourselves accountable to these higher intellectual standards, because these are barriers to critical thinking that we all kind of fall back on sort of second nature. So knowing what they are allows us to try and make some intended effort to get away from those things. First of all, there is simply avoidance. So this barrier to critical thinking is, instead of looking for new and different ideas and different opinions and viewpoints, a person deliberately avoids people or information that conflicts with their own beliefs or with their own views. So one avoids people and information that conflicts with their views. So one very prevalent form of resistance to critical thinking is simply avoidance. Now, it's the idea of only trying to be around people who have a like-minded opinion and deliberately avoiding the company or the information sources that would tend to disagree with you. So like if you're more on the conservative side, then you just don't talk to or deal with liberal people or like, you know, progressive media or anything. And the opposite could be the same, right? A very dedicated progressive who refuses to even engage with people on the other side of the ideological spectrum. So we should not seek to insulate ourselves from the diversity of viewpoints that are out there. Engagement with other people, especially those that are not of a like mind, is healthy and productive for our own intellectual development and for our ability to make the judgments in the light of all those opinions. So by avoiding people who tend to disagree with you, we'll talk about cognitive dissonance in just a minute, Ryan, but that's a good point. It's a very similar kind of concept. I think of them as kind of like the flip side of each other. They're related. Avoidance is not seeking out people. Cognitive dissonance actually, I'm sorry, I was thinking of confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is quite similar to the avoidance concept, because with confirmation bias, which I'm just going to put on the board in a minute, you only seek out supporting information. So you kind of like have a biased, prejudicial way of seeking out facts. You only look at the facts that agree with what you believe. Avoidance is the flip side of that, where it's not seeking out exclusively supporting information, but avoiding contrary information and opinion. So, you know, there's a big world of people, okay, and not everybody agrees. You're never going to have unanimous opinion across the board, nor are you going to have, 100% unanimity in the information that's provided to people. So if you really, really didn't want to ever have to deal with people that don't have the same viewpoints as you do, you're actually going to cut yourself off from like a huge possibility of experiences, relationships in your life, right? So why would you limit yourself to a narrow sphere of experience and possibility when there are so many more people in this world and so many more ideas that you can possibly engage with? So avoidance really, I mean, sometimes people do this because it makes them feel a little bit more secure, having insulated their beliefs from challenges. They therefore don't have to go through the difficult burden of justifying their beliefs or taking view of the criticisms to those beliefs. That might feel good psychologically, but at the same time, you're cutting yourself off from a wealth of experiences socially, relationships, and connections. So, not only is it bad, I think, as an intellectual habit, but it's not the best social strategy for you as you're trying to have the best life you can have and have the most good experiences with the diverse range of people that you could have. Okay. So that's one of the barriers, avoidance. And now I want to talk about confirmation bias, because that's closely related to avoidance. So confirmation bias is only seeking out information that reinforces or supports what you already believe. And by the way, Ryan, I don't want to ignore your comment about cognitive dissonance. We're going to talk about that also in a little while as we get closer to the end of today's lecture. But hold that thought. Okay, so confirmation bias, only seeking out information that supports or reinforces, that confirms what you already believe. Okay, so this is actually one of the biggest problems that we have right now, I believe, in our society, perhaps in the global sense too, but definitely in American society it's a big problem. So it's the idea of only seeking out information that confirms the things that you already believe. So it's like a bias in favor of your own beliefs. It's a bias in favor of confirming the beliefs that you already do have. So if a person, let's say, believed in flat Earth, take a person, hopefully none of you, but some person out there, who thought that the world was flat. If they had confirmation bias, then when they went out, for example, onto the internet or something to look up information on this question, what would be the only sort of sources or websites that they would go to? The flat Earth person. They've got confirmation bias. So when they look onto this question, or if they try and investigate it a little bit, they will only go to what type of information sources. With their confirmation bias, this type of individual would basically just look at what? Let me hear from you in the chat. It's a question. What do you think? Yeah, well, shady websites on the 8th page on Google. Exactly. I mean, it's a humorous way to put it, Alec, but it's basically true. Sarah, sources that also believe the Earth is flat. Exactly. So is this person really going to look at scientifically credible consensus, analysis having to do with the planetary shapes and try and form their view based on all of that? No. They're going to say, well, if there's any kind of view that contradicts what I believe, I'm just going to dismiss it, or even worse, maybe cast aspersions on the people who provide the information. Are these people who are part of a grand cabal motivated to deceive the Earth about the shape of its actual surface? To what end? To what benefit? Obviously, those are ridiculous and far-fetched ways of thinking. When you have confirmation bias, though, you'll do almost anything to avoid having your viewpoint undermined. So instead of accepting that maybe you're wrong, you could invent very, very intricate and elaborate alternative theories of reality in order to justify the things that you already believe. If everybody has confirmation, nobody's willing to hear anyone else out. Nobody's willing to even consider that they could be wrong, because when they look up information, they think that all they're doing is boosting their belief up and getting more and more credibility for it. So it's kind of like a dishonest way to conduct research. It's looking into the facts, but only looking into it in a way that's going to reinforce your already established belief. Like, for example, prior to Copernicus and Galileo, we'll talk about this later in the class when we talk about chapter 12, science, but prior to those guys, everyone thought, well, not everybody, but a lot of people in the West believed that the Earth was at the center of the universe, because they believed that God, having created the universe, wanted mankind to be placed at the center, because we are the children of God created in his image, and we're like the jewel of the creation. And of course, as we all know by now, we're the third planet away from the sun, and we don't sit at the center. Everything revolves around the sun in our local solar system, and we're definitely not at the center of the galaxy even. So what was done in order to try and justify the belief that the Earth was at the center? Well, there was this other guy, Ptolemy, and the church said, we are going to accept Ptolemy's interpretation because it preserves the intuition that the Earth is at the center. But that meant that they had to basically reconceive of all the data that they were getting from these new telescopes that had been invented. They had to make the postulate that the other planets were rotating around us in corkscrew patterns, which they called epicycles. That would be the only hypothesis that would allow them to sustain the consistency between the observations and the existing view that the Earth was at the center. So basically, they're twisting the data, they're manipulating the data so that it can fit a preconceived hypothesis. What hypothesis? That the Earth's at the center. When you have confirmation bias, you'll bend over backwards and you'll search all corners of the Earth for any kind of information that supports what you believe. And since the kind of person who has confirmation bias also practices avoidance, they're going to also at the same time avoid information that comes from any contrary argument or opinion. Okay, so two things we shouldn't do. We shouldn't indulge in confirmation bias, nor should we indulge in avoidance. Do the exact opposite. Don't avoid people or opinions that disagree with you. Engage with them. Take on their views, state your own views, and have that discussion. And don't simply try to reinforce your beliefs by means of confirmation bias. Be willing to take measure of the alternative other side of the argument, because a lot of these cases are positions where there's debate. Okay. But Earth being flat, though, is not debatable, at least not to me. So that wouldn't be the kind of thing that we actually debate. But, matters of policy, should there be a wall, should there not be a wall? Matters of, should there be a national healthcare system, should there not? These are things where you should be at least open-minded and honest enough to consider what exists on either side. Okay. Next up, we will talk about forms of resistance to or barriers to critical thinking. There's also anger. Now, anger is, in a way, something that we all know and is quite self-explanatory, but in connection to our class's theme of critical thinking, we can say it this way. Instead of critically analyzing an opposing viewpoint, a person simply gets angry at the person who provided or stated that opinion. So, one gets angry at the person who stated the view. Okay, now there's a little overlap in some of these concepts, but we're just working with the material that we have from our book. So anger. it's to have an emotional overreaction to the presentation of contrary viewpoints or opinions. You should not need to get angry when people challenge your views or when they say, I disagree and here's what I think and it's something totally different. People having different views is to be expected in a world as big as ours with a diversity of information and lifestyle and belief system that does exist. So when you do get angry also, you kind of undermine your own, raising their voice, insulting people. You're back to the pixel thing? I'll type it in. I'll type this one. So can you at least hear me pretty well? It's just your camera or the visual feed that you're having an issue with? Yeah, here. No, it is about ad hominem attacks too, Ryan. Let me put this in the chat since some have asked for it. Okay, no, don't worry, guys. I'm going to put it in the chat. So whenever it does dip like that, it's good for you to let me know so I can make sure I don't lose the notes. So it says here, instead of critically analyzing an opposing view, one gets angry at the person who stated the view. Okay, here we go. It's in the chat. No problem. Yeah, so when you get angry in the course of a discussion or even logical argument about your opinions, you undermine your own view and your own position, because do you really think it convinces another person that you're right if you no longer can rely on logic and reason to make your case, and you just have to start raising your voice, making fun of the person, even attacking them, banging your fists on the table? At that point, it makes you look as if you don't have confidence in the persuasiveness of your own position, that you have to resort to an emotional show of anger as a substitute for being able to make coherent reasons to the other person. So not only does it not really win the argument, it makes it look as though you're afraid to engage on the terms of the debate that the other person has set down by challenging your view logically. You know, and also an angry person is not really a happy person. That's the other thing that people sometimes forget. You're not going to be any better off getting mad at the fact that people don't agree with you. And if that does make you mad, then be prepared to go through your whole life angry, because there's always going to be people, even important people out there, that don't agree with some of us, right? I mean, none of us are going to ever have unanimous opinion across the board on any topic. So if it makes you mad that people don't agree with you on some of your cherished beliefs, you're going to have to carry that anger with you throughout your life. So instead of being angry, just try to be rational. You know, when people say things that you don't agree with, try and make the case why they're wrong. And if you can't make the case, then maybe you should have an open mind about changing your own opinion. We're just talking about opinions and information and what you believe is true and false. That's nothing to get angry about. Now, certainly sometimes the beliefs that people hold can lead to actions that we do become upset by. And we're definitely entitled to our passion and our convictions behind those commitments that we make. But in the course of dialogue and debate, there's no place for anger. By the time you're getting angry, I think you're losing the debate. And the other person who remains calm and just sticks with their rational presentation of facts and reasons looks to be the better and more persuasive member of the debate. Okay, so that's anger. And next we've got cliches, okay? So here's cliches. So cliches are just overused one-liner kind of phrases that seek to end a critical discussion or dialogue, okay? So overused one-liner phrases that seek to end critical discussion. All right. Can that be seen in the chat? Has the video quality improved at all, or shall I type this one in there too? Let me know real quick. And then, okay, so yes, as in it's better. Okay, thank you. So cliches. Sometimes we get tired, basically, of having an intellectual conversation or a debate or a logical argument, right? And when that happens and we feel like it's time to just duck out of this whole conversation or change the topic, a lot of times we will drop a cliche in the convo, and that cliche kind of signals to the other person, I'm done and I want to really go further with this. Problematic thing is, a lot of times we reach for these cliches too quickly. We don't use them just as like a last resort after we've exhausted all possibilities for the conversation. A lot of times people, they do it by second nature and they start using cliches all the time to just sort of escape having any discussion of any significant depth. So like, let's see, I'm sure there's many of these cliches that we use all the time. I'm guilty as much as probably a lot of us are. But we should try to be a little more frugal with how much we do it. We should be a little more judicious about the use of cliches, because when we overuse them, it becomes a habit, and then we get into the habit of not having like detailed and deep discussions about our views. So what do you think could be something like that? Two people are arguing, they're arguing about some political disagreement, and they're sharing their different opinions, they're giving their reasons back and forth. One person is saying maybe military needs to have its budget cut because our deficit is exploding, and we don't use all of those weapons systems, and there are other priorities that we could use to rebalance the budget. So the military spending is too much. And their opponent says that's false. If we ceded any of the military budget back, we would lose our military superpower dominance, and that would invite threats against the United States. So it's actually vital to our national security that we even spend more. So these two people are having their debate. Suppose that one side of the disagreement is getting tired of making the case, and then they just use a cliche. What do you think could be a cliche like that one might say, which has the effect of kind of ending that conversation? Can you think of any such things? I know there's. Let's agree to disagree. Okay, very good, Jasmine. That's definitely like one of those kind of cliches. Let's agree to disagree. Now, when you say that, it's a conversation stopper. It's one of those one-liners that people use too much, and all it is doing is trying to stop that conversation from going any further, dead in its tracks. I find it to be kind of a funny phrase, because people, when they disagree, they're not agreeing on anything. They're disagreeing about agreeing. So what do you mean agree to disagree? I don't agree with you if we disagree on something. I would rather that you agree with me. So anyway, there's not the only example though. Is there anything else that's sort of like on the same level as let's agree to disagree? There's more than that, but that's a good one. That's a good starting example. Anything else? Other cliches? Cliche phrases. You might throw this out there when you're done talking. It is what it is. Exactly. Yeah, that's another very common one. It is what it is. Okay. I hear what you're saying. It is what it is. Whatever. Whatever. That's another one. Just throwing out the simple phrase, whatever. Abortion's wrong. No, it's not wrong. People should have the right to choose. Well, do you really think the fetus is a person? Absolutely. It's got human DNA, and they keep going back and forth. Eventually, it's like, whatever. Let's agree to disagree. It is what it is. Anything else? There's others, too. Let's agree to disagree. It is what it is. I think there's one that's like slipping my mind. What do you have in your mind? Sometimes, like when people are trying to assign blame to like little kids and stuff, like you'll hear the cliche, "Oh, boys will be boys." Like that means let's not try and interrogate or investigate or think more deeply about the level of accountability that should be given to the young person. Never mind could be one. Yeah, never mind. Right? Never mind. Don't want to engage on this. Let's see what else is given in our book. Sometimes advertisers use these, and politicians use cliches as well to shield their own positions from critical analysis. So sometimes like a company slogan could even be the same. Yeah, that's life. C'est la vie. Exactly. Forget it. That's another good one, me. So you guys get the idea. To each his own. That's one that we hear a lot. To each his own. It's all relative. I have a right to my own opinion. Well, let's see what happens. Stuff like that, where there's no content or information that's put forward by making that comment. The only message that's given off is, let's not have further discussion on the topic. So look, about the cliches. Certainly there's some point to be made that we cannot have open-ended, debate and discussion without limits. It's not like we have all the time in the world to just do that on a never-ending basis. So sometimes, of course, you might have to discontinue an ongoing dialogue with a person to move on to other things that you're doing. That's fair, that's reasonable, but the problem is that we just do this too much. It's like salt, right? Like salt is good if you use it sparingly, but if you put too much on, you're going to kind of ruin the taste of the meal. So if you're using cliches all the time in every conversation, then you're the sort of person who doesn't want to think. You don't want to think. You don't want to have to justify yourself. You don't want to have to take view of what other people are saying either. So let's not overuse it, but you know, a little bit here and there. Probably a reasonable thing. Okay, those are cliches. Okay, and then there's denial. Okay, so that is just when a person just denies alternative views instead of analyzing their credibility. Okay. How do I put it? So denial. Another barrier or obstacle or way of resisting critical thinking is to practice denial. So denial is a little different from avoidance. I know that there's similarity in the different definitions, but avoidance is not even allowing yourself to be exposed to the alternative ideas or people, like trying to insulate yourself from the awareness of what they say, getting away from it completely. Denial is not the same, because with denial, it's not that you necessarily avoid the alternative views. You might hear them at least, but you just deny them full stop before you ever even investigate the claims for their credibility or their merit. So you know, you've already prejudged the facts. You've made up your mind that that anything alternative to what you believe has to be wrong. So if you hear those opinions, you just deny them before you think about it. You know, like, so some people think that the climate change isn't real. Their belief that climate change isn't real, if someone who gives them, you know, a substantial body of scientific literature or evidence, they might not even, you know, open the page and just say, oh, I don't believe that. That's totally wrong to me. Sometimes a person might believe that their favored policy in a policy debate has to be the right policy. And any argument, whether it's based on empirical data, you know, labor statistics or anything else, any metric that you give the person can't sway them because they're just in the grip of denial. You know, and sometimes it doesn't have to do with big questions of policy or what have you. It could be in an individual circumstance. Somebody's too drunk to drive. You're trying to tell them, look, look, here's all the evidence. Like, take this breathalyzer. You're blowing back like 0.15. You're way over the limit. You probably shouldn't drive. And the person says, no, you don't know me. You don't know how I am. I know my own body better than anybody. I know I'm not too drunk. So they just deny any evidence that's put to them. You want to be an open-minded person. You want to not just deny things flat out without even thinking about it. So good critical thinkers of the world, they are confident in their beliefs. They know they can support them with logic and reason. But if there's a good argument, if there's a better argument, if there's something that they hadn't considered, they're going to hear it out and take that into their judgment, okay? So it's a much better way to live and be intellectually, personally, academically, to not just deny things flat out before you at least see the evidence. That's prejudging things. You know, if you're a juror, you can't just make up your mind on day one. The guy's guilty, so can we just vote? And then they present you all this evidence and you say, you can't change my mind. I know he's guilty. I've already formed my opinion. You have to be willing to at least hear the evidence on both sides. Okay, so next up, there's ignorance. Today, it's all about the barriers to critical thinking. Aside from what I started with, the 3 levels of the critical thinking process, it's all about these, you know, pernicious barriers to critical thinking that we're trying to avoid or to do better. So there's also ignorance. Now, as a barrier to critical thinking, this is simply to deliberately stay uninformed about things so that you don't have to take a position or take an action. Ignorance is bliss is a cliche, yes, but I don't think it's true. There's nothing blissful about being ignorant. I guess you don't know about the bad things that are happening, but then they're going to happen to you, and you're not going to be prepared for them. So, I mean, is that better, like, than being informed about it, worrying a little bit about it, but taking steps? You know, like in this whole coronavirus thing. I mean, like, they say don't panic, you know, by telling people how bad it's going to be. But I'd rather be in a panic, getting my affairs in order, than to be completely oblivious and to die from the virus. But anyway, ignorance. Ignorance. Deliberately avoiding, deliberately staying uninformed about things. Okay, can we see that? It just says deliberate ignorance, deliberately staying uninformed about something to avoid having to take a position or to take an action. All right? So, like, sometimes in life, a person chooses not to even get any of the information on a topic so that they don't have to weigh in on it. Like, so somebody might say to somebody, hey, what about climate change? What is your opinion on that? You know, big topic in our world. What do you feel? What is your thought? And then the person says, you know what, I can't tell you anything. I'm totally ignorant on that subject. You know, I don't know anything. I'm not a scientist. I don't read the reports on it. So I'm just going to have to shrug my shoulders, sir or ma'am, because I have no knowledge of these facts. So I can't tell you what position I have. I can't take a position if I don't know anything about it. What's the problem with this person's appeal to ignorance? The problem is that there is information that's been disseminated widely to a popular public audience that the person could engage with if they chose to. So it's not really an excuse for inaction or a failure to take a position that you haven't looked at information which is available. Okay, so we shouldn't deliberately choose to remain uninformed about something just because it is uncomfortable for us to have to take a viewpoint. We should want to have opinions on things. Make up your mind about stuff. Look out into the world that you're living in your own life, and try and form opinions and judgments about it. If you don't do that, you really can't be excused by appeal to ignorance if the facts and the information do exist and they're available for you to at least examine. Okay. You know, like the textbook gives an example. After a big earthquake, like the one that hit Haiti, they give an example of a person who says, well, I'd like to donate, but I don't really know if, I guess I can't donate because I don't know which aid agencies are reliable and which ones just squander the money on their overhead costs or, you know, waste it in other ways that don't make a difference to the people in need. But they gave the example in the book that would also be a kind of weak appeal to ignorance because there's a lot of information that's provided about the record and track record of these different agencies. So if you wanted to seek it out, you could find it. Therefore, the ignorance is chosen rather than something that you have no ability to overcome. Okay, good. So that's the ignorance barrier. Okay, and just a few more of these. There's also conformity, another barrier to critical thinking. All right, so what is this? Well, conformity, that's one of those words that I think probably you've heard about in your life. At this point in life, the topic of conformity is something that I think a lot of young people, young adults have heard about, but let's bring it into our class and just make sure it's all clear. Conformity is when you just simply adopt the popular or the majority view. Charity Navigator, oh, duplicate message, not a word. Good deletion. Yeah, so conformity is when you adopt the viewpoint that you think is of the majority or the popular view, but why? To fit in and to avoid standing out somehow from the crowd. Okay, so you want to conform to be with the group, which means that you just glom on to the viewpoints they have. That means that you don't have to feel like isolated, alienated, a loner. You know, there's very powerful, I would argue, even evolutionary pressures on human beings to form into groups, to be identified as members of groups. We're social animals, so we don't like being alone and away from the pack. But the habit of mind that this instills within us is sometimes not intellectually healthy. So conformity.
One adopts the popular or majority view in order to fit in and avoid standing out. In order to fit in and avoid standing out. All right, so hopefully it's legible to you. It says conformity. Definition: one adopts the popular / majority view in order to fit in and avoid standing out. So, like I was saying, especially in your earlier part of life, you want to have an identity, and you form an identity by aligning yourself with certain views, certain groups, certain fashion trends, music styles, and not with others, right? So in a way, it's a healthy thing, but at the same time, it can be unhealthy if you just shut off your own independent thinking. There's some, I don't know if these are cliches, but maybe you've heard the cliche saying, it's just a little lesson of life that sometimes parents give to their kids. They say, well, if all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you do it too? The implication is it would be foolish to just always conform to what the popular crowd is doing, because sometimes they may do things that are wrong, unwise, or even dangerous. In which case, if you follow them, you're going to follow in their footsteps and do the same, dangerous, unwise, or unhealthy things. Yeah, you want to think for yourself because you have your own mind. Now, that doesn't mean that the crowd is always wrong. It doesn't mean that the majority viewpoint is always wrong. But when you do agree with the majority or with what is popular, it should be based on your own individual judgment and not just going along to be a part of the group. I've noticed, and it's true, that in a lot of cases where a person is a conformist, they may even harbor their own private doubts, but they don't want to give expression to the doubts because they fear exclusion from the group. So be an independent, unique individual, the person that you are. That doesn't mean that you cannot find yourself a member of any number of different intersecting and overlapping groups, but your judgments should be your own. One time, not long ago, I was driving around in Orange County, and I followed a whole line of cars that were driving also, right? And they're taking a left onto this city street. And it was like 5 or 6 cars ahead of me, so I just followed them. Now, when I took that left, I see all these construction guys in hard hats and stuff, and a bunch of signs are up. And one of the guys walks up to my car because we're only able to very slowly pass through the block. And he's looking at me, my window's down, and he says, "What are you doing? Don't you see there's signs everywhere? It says this block is closed for construction." And I was like, "Oops. Well, yeah, I should have seen the signs, but sir, you can see there's like 3 cars ahead of me, and they were all there, so I just followed them." And then he really did hit me with that. He said, "Well, what if your friends all jumped off a bridge? Would you jump off?" So, he gave me a little lesson right there. No real consequences, no big, loss. But it reminded me again, bring that up in your class lectures later, that conformity in this little benign human example is something that plays out in bigger circumstances across the board throughout life. Okay. Human beings, I've heard it said, are a herd animal. We like to be in the pack. We like to be part of a group. No one wants to be the loner that's left out. But the psychological pressure that gives us to conform can sometimes divest us from our independence and individuality too. Okay. Now, aside from the conformity, there's also struggling, and that's going to be the last one of these barriers to critical thinking that I think I'll talk about on this particular topic. And I just have like 2 or 3 additional definitions that I'll go over at the beginning next time. And then next time, I guess Thursday, my plan, as I'm seeing it now, is going to be just review for your guys' quiz. Okay, so we'll review everything in the class, get you ready for your quiz, and just finish the last 3 definitions or so from this chapter 1. Okay, so just keeping your head in the game as to what to expect for Thursday. Okay, and again, like I told you, Thursday we'll go over the homework. I'll give you guys all kinds of detailed instructions through the announcement system for how you're going to take your quiz next Tuesday. But it won't be a big deal. You're simply going to get the quiz form around 4 p.m. and then you're going to get a window of time to return it back to me as an email submission. Okay. So last of these barriers then is struggling. Okay, so this is the idea of endlessly struggling with what action or position to take and never ever coming to a conclusion, never reaching a conclusion. So endlessly struggling over which action or position to take and never reaching a conclusion. So it's reasonable to struggle for some little time over what action or position to take if there's a debated topic or if there's a tough dilemma that you're facing and you just don't know, what should my viewpoint be on this? Should I be pro-life, pro-choice? Should I be in favor of a Green New Deal or should I not? Should I favor Paris Climate Agreement or should I not? I'm talking about policies and moral questions and stuff like that. There's all kinds of different things in life where you, the individual, are in a position to make a choice as to what you think is right or wrong, what action or position you think is better or worse. And you're the judge on those things. But the thing is, sometimes people struggle very much over what side to take. I can identify with that. Of course, these are deep questions, and you don't want to just take a frivolous, ill-considered position that's not based on much reflection. So a person's, for example, going to struggle over how to vote, perhaps. Let me give you an example of how this could be a barrier to critical thinking. So you ask the person, election's coming up. It's a big election, maybe the biggest of our lifetime. Everyone's going to weigh in. What's your view? Is it Biden or Trump? The person's like, it's a tough call. I've got problems with both candidates. There's things I like about both candidates. I'm struggling on this one. I'm struggling with how to vote. So I need more time to think about it. So you're like, that makes sense. It's a tough call. Maybe you say that. Anyway, then time passes, and maybe there's a week to go now before the election. You ask the person again, hey, when I talked to you a month ago, you were struggling over your vote. What do you think now? I'm struggling right up to the last minute. Still can't make up my mind. I hear the arguments of both. I've read the platforms of both candidates and what their parties have to offer, and I'm still stuck on this one. I'm still struggling. Maybe I'll come up with a better answer by the time you talk to me next time. So now it's past the election. It's a week later. It's all over with. You ask the person, so what was your view in the end? I know you were struggling on this one for a long time. What did you do? Say, you know what? I just ended up not voting. I was struggling till the end, and I just couldn't make up my mind. And at the end of the day, I just couldn't figure out what I really thought. So I don't have an opinion on it, and I didn't take any action on it either. Now, that's a barrier to critical thinking. It becomes a barrier when it just goes on and on and on forever. So definitely debate, deliberate, analyze all the merits and viewpoints that are available, but don't allow it to go on indefinitely long, because the whole point of all this intellectual labor is to reach a conclusion. Wouldn't it have been a waste of all the time that you spent thinking about a topic if you never even form an opinion on the topic at the end? So form your opinions based on the best evidence and analysis that you can give. Struggle for a little while, that's reasonable, but don't allow it to go on forever. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels and you're never even making judgments or drawing conclusions in the end. Okay. Now, after that part of chapter 1, there is a little discussion of a couple of additional what they call forms of narrow-mindedness. Now, it's not really a whole separate category. These are also barriers to critical thinking, but they place them in their own little subcategory. So they're like barriers to critical thinking that could be seen as forms of narrow-mindedness. And I won't be able to list all the definitions and discuss each one with a few minutes that I'm leaving for today. It's about 5 or 6 minutes left. But I'll show you what the topics will be, and then we'll quickly cover them at the beginning in a few minutes on our Thursday. Okay? So forms of narrow-mindedness. All right, forms of narrow-mindedness. So we're going to discuss absolutism, egocentrism, ethnocentrism, anthropocentrism, and then just rationalization, doublethink, and cognitive dissonance. And that's where we will end when we finish up next time. So we just have these terms to go over. Rationalization, doublethink, and cognitive dissonance. So we do have a few additional definitions, but many of them kind of go fast because they're related. The pages of the textbook that cover that part of chapter 1 are just pages, let me give you the pages, 24 through 28. So pages 24 through 28, those 4 pages will just cover these last few definitions. And together with the quiz review that we will do on Thursday, I'll go over these. Let me just briefly touch on them in passing, and that'll kind of give you a segue into the next meeting. Starting with this one, because I started here and then drew at the top above it. Absolutism is always believing that authority figures are absolutely right and trusting what they say without any doubt or challenge at all. So assuming that authority figure is always absolutely right. It's kind of like the dualist phase of cognitive development. It's the sort of person who lacks the ability to challenge authority or to disagree or to doubt anything that they say. Egocentrism, that's thinking that you are the center of everything and that you are better and smarter than other people. If you're an egocentric type, then you have a low level of respect for other people's views, especially if they don't agree with you because you think you're the best and the brightest and no one else is on your level. You have to be a little bit humble and honest in this world. Even if you're very smart, there's a lot of things that you can learn from other people. Ethnocentrism, that is the unjustified belief in the superiority of a person's race or group or culture. So like white supremacy or whatever is a form of ethnocentrism, which is definitely something that tears at the bonds of the social fabric, and it's a huge problem, which is totally unjustified also scientifically. I mean, what is a person really thinking? That there's a hierarchy among the races and that some are better and worse than others, like naturally, according to their genes? This is something that is completely false. It's provably false. But people have their very, strange attitudes about the value of their genetic ancestry. Now, Betsy, which page? Oh, which version? I'm talking about edition, this one. What is it again? The 4th edition. Yeah, so the 27 4th edition, pages 24 to 28. That's where these topics are covered. Anyway, anthropocentrism is thinking that humanity is the center of everything and then having low level of respect for nature and the non-human animals. In my mind, it's not as bad as these other forms of narrow-mindedness because I do believe we're superior to the animals, but we have to have respect for those animals. If we don't, not just animals, but the overall biosystem and nature, if we don't respect those things, then that we're going to undermine our own status and survival on this planet. Man is perhaps the measure of all things. We are the coolest animals out there and the coolest life forms maybe in the universe, but we're not the only living things, and we depend on the interdependence of everything in the biosystem for our own survival into the future. Rationalization is coming up with like an excuse for why you did something later, but you didn't really have that reason in the first place. So it's kind of coming up with the reason after the fact. Doublethink is believing 2 things that are opposite at the same time. Cognitive dissonance is when your own views or social behaviors are challenged by new views and different social behaviors, and you're kind of experiencing the dissonance between the old and the new. Sometimes I've seen like members of the older generations will experience like social dissonance because they have memories of when they were young and the world now is way different. And cognitive dissonance is similar to that, except just with beliefs. You have a bunch of beliefs, but now you're in an environment where those beliefs are challenged by other people, And so the tension between what you think and this new normal or something, or this new environmental norm, can face you with that cognitive dissonance. Okay, guys, so a lot of material was covered today. The goal was to try and zip through the remaining parts of Chapter 1. I know that I ran through this part pretty quickly, but if the discussion of that is decent enough, then we can devote more of the time to our review on Thursday, which is probably a good idea. So yeah, thanks everybody, and I've sent some videos, or I will send some videos of the social psychology experiments and clips of those things that I wanted you guys to look at. So have a chance to view them if you get free time. That'll help you remember even better and understand better the significance of the Zimbardo and the Milgram studies. Okay, guys, so I'm going to let you guys go. Thanks everybody for your attendance and for all of your help and keeping things on track. I appreciate it, and I'll definitely see you guys back then on Thursday. Take care. Bye-bye.